Hi, I'm Jack. Different video, devlog coming out tomorrow, but today I want to talk about how I basically developed this character here that you see, who is, I would say, one of the protagonists of the game I'm working on, Marco Volpe. And Marco Volpe started out as a character for a novel I was working on. Essentially, someone who yielded great influence as an affluent merchant, but since fell from grace because of a betrayal of his closest friend. Um, so that's kind of the story behind him at a very broad scale. But mostly what I wanted to talk about today was um, like how I designed him on a visual level. And to start with that, I've got my sketchbook here. Um, and because he's been at the forefront of my mind for a long time. I've got plenty of sketches and stuff of him. So this is the first sketch I could find of him. That's Marco there. As you can say, as you can see, he kind of started out heavily inspired by Mr. Kitsuragi, if you know who that is. Anyway, got another sketch of him here. Yeah, so this one is more recent. Um, Trying to give him his own style. And so I took that and I brought it into a free program called Fire Alpaca. Um, and when he first got into Fire Alpaca, he looked like this. You can tell I didn't flip the canvas because look how like leaning to one side he is. This was a extremely quick sketch. I think it took me like maybe less than 15 minutes. And that was just mainly to make sure he worked in the game. Um, but then I could throw his portrait into the game code and show up when you talk to him. And from here, I really wanted to polish his design a little bit. And when you're designing a character, you really have to, well, when designing a character as part of a game, as an independent developer of said game, you have the opportunity to make every decision. And when you're talking about something like character design, um, you know, every design element can be and perhaps arguably should be a design decision. And so, oh, that is not Marco, that's another character. I don't see him, mate. So, looking at this character, what you want the player to make assumptions because although the world is complex and you want complex characters, at the same time you want some part of them to be uh, understandable at first glance. So you can see with this character, Marco, and the video's about, we've got lots of angular shapes. Like he's almost made entirely out of triangles. Um, like, even things you wouldn't expect to be triangles, like, say, his eyebrows, oh, or, um, well, I guess eyebrows are kind of triangular, hey. I guess like his nostrils are triangle, his glasses are triangles, his eyes are triangles, his hair is a triangle, or like that, right? His ears are triangle, okay? And you might pen this down to art style, but if you contrast him with another character that I just showed, Luca, Luca is made almost entirely out of circles. His nose is a circle. What the hell? His eyes are circles, his eyebrows are circles. Okay, and you might say, okay, well, one guy's circles, one guy's triangles. But the reason that this is important is due to something called shape language. So we tend to think of characters with an angular, triangular design to be edgy or associated with things like speed. And this fits into Marco's essence as a character because his occupation is a courier. He's someone who makes deliveries. Um, and so that's why I went with triangles as his main design element. And with Luca, I went with circles, sorry, because I wanted to project ideas of positivity and uh, childishness, or yeah, childishness, naivete, things like this. And these have real life parallels. Like when someone's happy, their eyebrows do raise a little bit, and there is some part of a circle visible on their face, and the mouth turns into an upright circle, things like this. Someone's cross, maybe their eyebrows are a bit more triangular, at least in a macro sense. Anyway, and as one more example, here we have Redmond, who's a square character, and that might promote a sense of stability or dependability and maybe immovability. So he's kind of like Santa. He's Santa, not in a narrative sense, but he's friendly and you feel like you can trust him. And that's what I try to communicate with this shape language. And next, I want to talk about the colors. So color language is also important with characters. Um, and you can see here that like Marco's skin is very desaturated. So in the color palette, his skin's far away from the color. And, you know, obviously, if someone's skin is desaturated, you might think that they spend a lot of time indoors. And that's just a real life parallel. And so you might think, well, why does Marco spend a lot of time indoors? Um, and you might associate that with a more like analytical mind or more of like a homebody. And his hair too is also fairly desaturated. Um, and his eyes are actually red. So not because of morally questionable decisions, depending on your um, inclination thereof, but because maybe he spends a lot of time like staying up late at night. Maybe he is anxious about something. Maybe he's obsessive in the way that he could spend a lot of time indoors at night working on something. And as it turns out, Marco is quite an obsessive character, and so I chose those colors to reflect that personality of his. And moving on from that, his clothing is relatively hypersaturated, and that might promote ideas of material wealth. But Marco isn't wealthy in the narrative, so but he was historically. So you might get the idea that he's holding on to his past and kind of peacocking that through his choice in clothing. Like, I'm wealthy, or I used to be wealthy, and I want people to think I'm still wealthy, so I'm going to choose clothing that uses rich colors. Like, and that traces back to real history, where the wealthy would use more saturated dyes in their clothing, whereas lower class would keep their clothing of plain colors like browns and um, you know, more cheaper pigments in their clothing. And Psychologically, color, it's debatable on the effect that it has, but red is usually associated with not so much anger, but pain. And I feel that Marco is a conflicted character with um, lots of emotional distress because of his history with other characters in the narrative. And so I think the fact that the two most striking features of Marco being his clothing and his eyes, which are green, that is set apart complementarily from his clothing, tells you that, you know, he he has a keen eye, or perhaps that, he's always watching. Um, and that contrasted with the red of his clothes means that maybe he's an angry character. Um, and so you get from just color and shape, you get quite a complex uh, combination of ideas before he even before he even speaks. Like and that and his body language, his keeping his hand to his mouth, that might tell you that he thinks a lot. Like most people have that pose when they're thinking, or maybe he's insecure about his face. You know, and I hope to sort of communicate a complex idea of a character through um, the design thereof. And I just want to quickly contrast that with Luca, who um, his skin tone is fairly saturated, um, and I kind of wanted, and his it's more shifted towards the yellow side of the spectrum. So I wanted him to kind of promote yellow being associated with like happiness or the sun, like brightness, because he is meant to be quite a positive character, but perhaps that positivity stems from a childish view of the world. And emotionally, I wanted Luca to maybe not be a child by age, like he's clearly quite developed physically, but childish in his mindset. And that really contrasts with Marco, who, in a narrative sense, is quite a mature character. And because of that maturity, he's self-righteous in his sense of, say, world weariness or nihilism. And so Marco's philosophy is really set apart from Luca's philosophy. Um, and so these are the two protagonists of the game. And I tried to make them very contrasting in their personalities. And I tried to communicate that contrast in every design decision that I could. And as an artist, like a lot of my design decisions have to be made through the art because I'm not a sophisticated programmer. I'm playing to my strengths a little bit here. Um, and lastly, although I'm an artist, I'm not a 3D artist. So let me just load some renders up. Um, and this was really challenging for me. But I looked up a YouTube tutorial by someone called Crash Sune, and that they have maybe the best low poly tutorial on YouTube. I was able to model this in like less than 2 hours, and there's some imperfections here, but despite being low poly, I feel that I was able to create the silhouette of Marco in such a way that it's recognizable. Like we've got the triangles of his hair, uh, promoting his angular features, and you've got his robe, which is loose fitting, and I think that further communicates a sense of insecurity, perhaps. And you say, well, you don't want to profile someone, but he is he is a fictional character, so we can do some profiling here. Um, And these are just some progress shots. Here we have he's wearing high-waisted pants, so you might think that might communicate something like he's a bit of a, well, a tight ass, let's say, literally, um, and is wearing boots that are the same color as his robe, more or less. And I kind of just wanted that to simplify his color palette. Like he could have had brown boots, but um, you know, here we have kind of like a sandwich of colors, and that might make him recognizable, and I might even be able to like abstract that color information out. You know, he's only made up of three colors when it comes down to it. Here I've put his glasses on, and this is a finished 3D model. So that took me about 2 hours. No, it took me 2 hours to make the mesh, and then another few hours to make the texture to map over the UV unwrapping or whatever it's called. And then I rigged him and now he's posable and I'll be able to animate him, and that's probably what I'll be doing next week, but more about game development in the devlog that's coming out tomorrow. Um, so I'm hoping this video, like I haven't stopped talking, kind of communicated how I design characters and how everything in game development is a design decision. And when you have the freedom to be in charge of every decision, um, you have the freedom to send any message that you are capable of sending. And with that um, agency, um, your game should be a medium or a vessel of your thoughts and ideas. And hopefully, I've shown how my background in art is able to communicate complex characters through, at face value, is seems like quite limited information, but once you start breaking down our preconceptions of color and shape, you can see that um, associating perhaps subconscious information, um, pairing that with narrative information, you can hopefully make a character that uh, audiences will remember. Um, yeah, so that's a little bit on how I make characters, and tomorrow we'll be looking at what those characters do in my game. That'll be Devlog 3, so thanks for watching.